Welcome to DJ Sellwood's PhD final presentation today. As is the practice of Flinders University, we began by acknowledging the indigenous people of this country. In particular, we acknowledge the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of this land, and the waters on the region Flinders University is located. I'm Kami Raghavendra. I'm an Associate Professor in Disability and Community Inclusion, and it's a great pleasure today to introduce DJ Sellwood. DJ has completed an undergraduate degree in Computer and Information Science from University of South Australia, and then he did his honours, and I had the privilege of being one of his honours supervisors with Professor Denise Wood. And today DJ will present his PhD presentation, and I'll hand it over to DJ. He will be presenting for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open it out for questions. And I want to say a special welcome to DJ's family and friends, and also to Professor Tara Brabazon, Dean of Graduate Research. Tara's waving from there. And Dr. David Caudry. David Caudry, most of you would know, as being the leader and champion of disability services in South Australia for a very, very, very long time.
That's the best introduction I've ever had.
Welcome, David, and welcome everyone. Daryl. Yeah, that's right.
I decided to stop over in San Francisco on the way to the 2016 ASAC conference in Canada, where I was going to present the preliminary findings of my research. I took a support worker to assist me with personal care. Let's call him Anton. One evening in San Francisco, after a full day of tourist activities, Anton and I planned to have a meal and then to head back to the hotel for the night. People who have communication and physical disabilities can rarely be spontaneous. Most of the time we must plan to do even the most routine tasks. On the way back to our hotel, I heard a song from my childhood being sung in a bar. I had to go in. I decided to join a couple of women dancing near me. Starting a conversation with them, I used a mixture of communication techniques, which included using my communication device. After dancing for a while, one of the women, Joanne, offered to buy me a drink. We then went up to the bar. Relaxing on a stool with her shoes off from dancing, and helping me take a sip of my drink, Joanne put one of her legs across my lap, and rested her foot on a stool, which was close to my wheelchair. I started massaging her barefoot, which she seemed to enjoy. My thoughts went to Shuttleworth's 2000 research project about men with cerebral palsy seeking intimacy. One of his dating recommendations was to offer foot rubs to potential partners. As a doctoral candidate with a disability, it was not my intention to turn this moment into research, yet I remember thinking, I now had evidence that supported Shuttleworth's findings. Enjoying the moment, I realized I had decisions to make. Some of these decisions any man would have to make, such as whether or not to pursue the relationship. But I had additional decisions to contend with because of my disability. Would her hotel room be accessible? If we went to the room Anton and I shared, what would Anton do for the night? How would I transfer from my wheelchair onto the bed? Would Joanne understand my speech if we went to bed together? What would happen if I needed assistance that Joanne did not feel comfortable with? I decided to retire as gracefully as I could, and, after exchanging Facebook details and numbers, we said our goodbyes. Although I knew that I should just enjoy it for whatever it was, part of me was hoping it would develop into more. Yet the relationship ended up just being Facebook friends with. I used this true story in the prologue of my thesis to set the scene. It highlights some of the things people with complex communication needs experience in daily life. As you can clearly tell by looking at me, and by the way I am presenting this paper, I am a person with complex communication needs, who has physical and communication disabilities. My research investigated the lived experiences of people with complex communication needs in developing romantic and sexual relationships. To my knowledge, this is the first time that a researcher with such disabilities has conducted research within their own community on such a personal and sensitive topic. Not only are the findings stimulating, but several methodological features of the research set it apart. Today, I plan to present highlights from these two areas. The term complex communication needs refers to having a physical or intellectual disability and being unable to effectively use speech for everyday communication. People who have complex communication needs can use augmentative and alternative communication (AAC) strategies and systems to assist them to communicate and express themselves. This research had a focus on adults who have physical disabilities and used at least one form of AAC. While doing this research, I gained an insight which relates to the broader disability field. It significantly shifted my understanding of disability and helped shape the discussion chapter of the thesis. In reviewing the disability literature and analyzing the data I had collected from the interviews I conducted, it became clear that there is a paradox in the aims of the disability field. There is an apparent assumption that its primary goal is to integrate people with disabilities into society and enable them to live a life as near to normal as possible. However, the very act of attempting to engage in social relationships requires people with complex communication needs to do things that are not normally required. It could therefore be argued that the attempt to be normal is an abnormal act. On reflection, my entire life is outside the norm. The very fact that the disability sector attempts to help people with disabilities to fit into society means it operates on the fringes. People with disabilities are more likely to experience difficulties with sexual activities or intimacy, and are often subjected to the misconception that they are asexual. They are frequently treated as children requiring protection from sexual knowledge and experience. Despite these obstacles, people with disabilities experience similar emotional, physical and sexual feelings, desires, and needs as to the general population. Literature acknowledges that many lead healthy, exciting, and fulfilled sexual lives, and partake in a range of diverse forms of sexual expression. The disability and sexuality literature have concentrated predominantly focused on people who have intellectual or acquired disabilities. It has been argued that people with acquired disabilities require a rehabilitation approach that assists them to adapt to their new life circumstances, whereas people with congenital disabilities require a developmental approach to support them in their sexuality and relationships. However, there had been very little research into the lived experiences of people with congenital disabilities in developing intimate relationships. At the beginning of this research, a systematic review was conducted into the perceived barriers and facilitators experienced by people with congenital physical and communication disabilities in socializing, sharing intimacy, expressing sexuality. It was published in the Sexuality and Disability Journal and identified a gap in research regarding the lived experiences of people with complex communication needs in developing romantic or sexual relationships. It highlighted that, although people with disabilities are sexually active, little is known of the experiences of people with complex communication needs in developing intimate relationships. As a result of the systematic review and review of other literature, the research questions were: What are the lived experiences of people with complex communication needs in developing romantic or sexual relationships? What are the barriers and facilitators to developing romantic or sexual relationships for people with complex communication needs? To address these research questions, I developed a theoretical framework drawing on the concept of ableism, critical hermeneutics, feminist standpoint theory, and the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health Model. Ableism is a type of discrimination which gives preference to able-bodied individuals and degrades those with a disability, resulting in prejudice toward the latter. This type of discrimination is shaped by practices and dominant attitudes in society that devalue those with disabilities and has the ability to limit the potential of people with disabilities. A critical hermeneutics approach was utilized to explore the participants' lived experiences. This allows the researcher to draw on prior knowledge and to incorporate theoretical frameworks into the analysis of the phenomenon. For this project, I, the researcher, was a member of the cohort being studied and had knowledge as a member of that cohort. Therefore, feminist standpoint theory was also employed for its recognition of this prior knowledge. Feminist standpoint theory recognizes the position of the researcher as being the insider knower in relation to the phenomenon being studied. This concept, called situated knowledge, can influence the understanding and knowledge of the social relationships. The situated knowledge of the insider researcher enables the researcher to have access to knowledge that may not be available to an outsider researcher. 9 adults who had complex communication needs were interviewed regarding their lived experiences in developing romantic and sexual relationships. Semi-structured interviews were conducted over Skype or in person. As both the participants and I had complex communication needs, there were additional methodological issues to consider, which are usually taken for granted by other researchers. People with complex communication needs face multiple barriers to participate in research, including often having poor literacy skills, the inability to access the internet independently, and the need to expend considerable physical effort and time to prepare their responses. Conducting face-to-face interviews allowed for the participants to choose the communication mode they perceived as most efficient for them, enabled me to determine the authenticity of their contribution, and to provide immediate responses to their nuances and emotional states, and to be more time efficient, producing richer data. Data analysis occurred after the interviews were transcribed and participants had confirmed their accuracy. The data analysis of the interviews utilized the 6 phases of thematic analysis proposed by Braun and Clark. These phases are iterative, with each phase building on its predecessor. The 6 phases are: familiarization with the data, generating initial codes, searching for themes, reviewing themes, defining and naming themes, and producing the results chapter. 10 participants were recruited, however, 1 withdrew for personal reasons. Their ages ranged from 21 to over 70, with 1/3 identifying as male. All had high school education or higher. and the majority were heterosexual. Their daily activities included study, employment, day programs and post-retirement activities. Participants used dedicated AAC devices, mostly direct access. A few used computer tablets, and a small number used paper and pen. A few participants used communication assistants. Other methods included spelling words using speech, or on body parts, eye pointing and body gestures. From this point on, I will be presenting the results and a discussion combined, drawing on experiences discussed by 4 of the 9 participants. Usually, spelling and grammatical errors are denoted when using direct quotes. However, the responses of the participants who typed their answers contain an abnormally high number of spelling and grammatical errors. To maintain the integrity of these responses, and not to detract from the participants' intended meaning, it was decided not to denote these errors within the presented direct quotes. The data has been summarized, and pseudonyms have been used to maintain confidentiality. Jasmine was a young woman with cerebral palsy. She was at a concert when an able-bodied male started to dance with her. They were getting on very well, but other people interjected and guided him away from her, and she never saw him again. Emma was an outgoing professional woman who had a physical disability from late childhood. She was an active member of a group of young people and slept with a male member of the group. The other males in the group reacted in an overprotective way, punishing him for taking advantage of her, although she said that she eventually slept with all the other males in the group. Katie was another young woman with cerebral palsy who lived in supported accommodation. She and her fiancé had complex communication needs. Their relationship had been long-term. However, where she lived they could only have physical contact occasionally on weekends, if support staff placed them on the floor together. Several years after her fiancé died in a tragic accident, Katie befriended a male friend and they became friends with benefits. Oscar, a young homosexual male with mild cerebral palsy, used LGBTIQ dating websites to connect with males for sex. In his youth, he used to enjoy seeing the reaction of potential sexual partners when they realized he had a disability. Now he is more careful, being upfront about his disability before meeting them in person. Today I will be drawing on 3 major findings from my research that relate to ableism, new acquaintances, and intimacy. Ableism is discrimination against people with disabilities by giving preference to able-bodied individuals. The findings showed that ableist attitudes were rife throughout many of the participants' experiences, primarily from others, including strangers, friends, and family members. Neither they, nor I, specifically referred to ableism in the interviews, but could it be that we are so immersed in it that we do not recognize it? David Foster Wallace was an American writer who told a story about 2 young fish, pointing out that frequently important realities are not recognized, even though they obviously exist all around us. There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" Perhaps the participants and I could ask, being so immersed in it, what the hell is ableism? According to McClure, 2010, if disabled people are constantly immersed in ableism, they can internalize the ideology. This can be seen in Jasmine's initial reaction to the able-bodied man, who began to dance with her. Just when the chance of romance was blooming, the ableist attitudes of friends and security staff saw him ushered out of the door. But also, it seemed she had internalized ableism, doubting herself and believing her disability made her less worthy of the attention she was suddenly receiving and enjoying. One product of ableism I noticed, while reviewing the findings, was a phenomenon I have called the invisible line. The invisible line gives insight into the pervasive, yet often subtle, ableism in the lives of people with disabilities, and particularly those with complex communication needs. It occurs when a person with a disability crosses a line, and invokes an extreme and unusually negative response within a social group. All of the people involved seem oblivious to the existence of the invisible line, until it is crossed. And, when that happens, the extreme response is often misunderstood. This phenomenon can be seen in two of the experiences reported, and, in each, the responses created barriers to relationship development for the participants involved. The two circumstances were Jasmine flirting with a potential partner at a concert, and Emma initiating sex with an able-bodied member of her group of friends. In both situations, the participants believed they were behaving within the social norms of their groups, until the dynamics changed abruptly, and they experienced sudden disapproval from their friends. The friends probably felt they were being helpful, but their actions unconsciously demeaned the two women, treating them as if they were incapable of making their own decisions. Jasmine and Emma's friends may have been unthinkingly applying stereotypes, such as that people with severe disabilities are asexual, do not have the same physiological sexual needs as their able-bodied peers, and need to be cared for. Research acknowledges that people with complex communication needs often have limited social networks and are socially isolated, making it more difficult to meet new people. Ableist attitudes of acquaintances and strangers can create further barriers for people with complex communication needs in meeting new people. However, the participants in this study reported methods they used to subvert this ableism. Being introduced to new people was identified as a facilitator to assist in mitigating ableism. Jasmine said that it was useful to be introduced to new people. While superficially this might seem obvious, it was actually quite profound, as Jasmine was suggesting she needed more than a basic exchange of names. She needed her friends to take a more deliberate approach to introducing her. With her permission, they could have provided greater detail regarding her modes of communication, and some pertinent information which may have provided additional scaffolding for a friendship to develop. This can help to mitigate potential ableist attitudes, negative attitudes towards people with disabilities. New acquaintances are more likely to communicate with her if they understand how she communicates. This is a simple, but powerful facilitator for people with complex communication needs to expand their social networks and possibly increase the chance of meeting potential romantic or sexual partners. As people with complex communication needs are using online environments to participate in society, many are using social networking sites to develop relationships. 3 participants discussed using online dating sites to meet potential partners, the 2 female participants forming long-term relationships. The online environment permits a degree of anonymity, as the person whom they are pursuing may not initially be aware of their disability. Jasmine raised an interesting point regarding managing ableism. She said the online environment allowed her to be in control in developing relationships. This control empowers people to disclose information about their disability when and how they choose. Initially, Oscar would not disclose his disability until meeting face to face. However, he came to realize that it was more helpful to tell potential partners about his disability before meeting them. Emma disclosed her disability only after becoming better acquainted, using humor to overcome possible negative attitudes. This highlights the extra effort she needed to put into developing relationships because of her disability. Both Jasmine and Emma found it easier to allow a partner to get to know them before having to worry about the additional disability-related factors. The data demonstrated that, even after the participants had managed to form a relationship, they also experienced significant additional barriers to maintaining these relationships than those encountered by able-bodied people. Support workers play an important role in the lives of people with complex communication needs, providing personal care. Yet several participants discussed needing their assistance to prepare to have sex. This included assisting them to get out of their wheelchairs and undressing. For people with complex communication needs, private places often become public as they are workplaces for support workers, and welfare of staff generally takes precedence over the sexual expression of clients. The policies around sexual matters of many service providers can be non-existent, putting all parties at risk. Katie had to negotiate the system to have physical time with her fiancé. Having to negotiate support with staff further increases the difficulty for people whose communication is already an issue. Finding workers who are willing and can be trusted to provide this support can be an ongoing challenge, particularly as there is often a high turnover of staff. Communication within intimacy was discussed in all the interviews and formed a major theme within the ICF barriers and facilitators components. Most of the AAC strategies that the participants used had their shortcomings, not adequately supporting them even in their social communication. Accessibility of AAC devices when in bed was a major issue, so to compensate for this lack of accessibility, the participants were innovative in their communication strategies to facilitate their romantic and sexual relationships. Their devices supported their communication needs within their daily activities, but, in bed, they were either physically impossible to access or awkward to use. The level of risk involved in having sex while being unable to communicate effectively was alarming. One participant with severe cerebral palsy and dysarthric speech said, being sexually aroused increased her spasticity, causing her body to spasm and making communication extremely difficult. She highlighted the power of the partner and the importance of trust. While she gave the impression that she enjoyed having sex and indicated that it was consensual, some may question her ability to effectively communicate ongoing consent in intimate moments. When one partner's communication is severely diminished, the other has increased power and responsibility and needs to be proactive in maintaining communication. To conclude, it was often supportive family members, friends, and support workers who were significant facilitators in the social interactions and love lives of the participants. While support workers were important facilitators, the policies that govern their practice often seriously hindered opportunities for intimacy. It was reported that AAC devices can be problematic in intimate settings, as they do not adequately support communication. Ableist attitudes featured prominently among the barriers which appeared in the attitudes of others, and even of the participants themselves. Nevertheless, the participants did not dwell on their disabilities, despite the relentless ableism they encountered. At present there is a grey area in policy about provision of the support required by people with complex communication needs in expressing their sexuality and participating in intimate adult relationships. This was demonstrated in Katie's experiences of having to negotiate with staff and agency policies to have physical time with a fiancé outside of their wheelchairs. The disability sector needs to improve the development of policies governing the provision of personal care support in sexual activity at both government legislation and support agency levels. The NDIS aims to provide reasonable and necessary care and support to enable people to live a regular life. Foster and others, 2016, argued that the NDIS guidelines and their implementation are ambiguous surrounding the expression of sexuality. It is important for the NDIS to have clear policies surrounding support for relationships and sexual activity. This highlights the importance of further research to support ongoing national policy development as the scheme is rolled out. AAC practitioners are commonly speech pathologists and occupational therapists, specializing in AAC. They need to take a whole life approach, ensuring the person has access to adequate vocabulary available in their AAC tools and the opportunity to use that vocabulary. This includes vocabulary which supports sexual education and individual sexual expression. It is vital that young people have access to adequate vocabulary to communicate with the adults around them and with their peer group. It is probable that these two vocabulary sets would be different, as the type of language for the latter group would be less formal and more colloquial than the first. Nevertheless, this is important as it supports their social participation and development. Most designers, manufacturers, and suppliers of AAC devices are able-bodied, so it could be argued their devices are limited by unconscious ableist attitudes. AAC manufacturers and suppliers actively encourage users of communication devices to have input into product design, but there are complex issues surrounding accessibility, positioning and the need for flexibility, and able-bodied persons ultimately decide what is produced. The participants in this research improvise their own innovative modes of communication when having sex, demonstrating that the design and development of interventions should utilize the knowledge and expertise of people with complex communication needs. The research project had inherent limitations that need to be taken into consideration while interpreting the outcomes. Although there are benefits to using feminist standpoint theory in the interview and data analysis phases, it is acknowledged that by its nature my standpoint also brings with it my own biases and prejudices. I have remained conscious of this risk. In the methodology chapter of the thesis, I detailed the methods used to ensure that the interpretation of the data was rigorous and credible, in order to contribute new and unique understanding and knowledge to the academic field. However, as I have used my own standpoint, my contribution will be different from another researcher's interpretation and knowledge generation, using another theoretical perspective. This was exploratory research with a small number of participants, but it is qualitative research which allows lower numbers. The data set would have been enhanced if the original target of 20 people had been met. However, it might then have been too large to interpret and report reliably and in such depth, given the time constraints of the PhD candidature and my physical abilities. It must be acknowledged that participants and overall from Western countries which had developed services for people with disabilities, and all had white privilege. Despite the sample limitations, the findings have produced rich and unique insights into the lives of people with complex communication needs. The limited sample should not detract from these rare insights into their lived experiences. Further research is needed into the design of AAC systems that are effective for intimate communication. The research revealed that many participants were not able to access their AAC devices in intimate moments. Some indicated that they relied on their partners to maintain communication while having sex. Human interface design research is needed to inform AAC design so as to improve intimate communication. Such research could assist in producing innovative solutions to exploit the market potential. This should include research into using wearable technological solutions for people with disabilities, building on the research being conducted by Malfuri and others, 2017. Within the practices of BDSM, maintaining communication is important. It is vital for BDSM participants to be able to communicate their expectations, wants and preferences before as well as during their participation in the activities. Tellia, 2017, suggests the disability community could learn from this open and honest communication between participating partners. In BDSM activities that involve mouth gags or facial masks, communication is restricted for at least one of the participants, and the other has power over the activities, yet communication is maintained throughout the acts. This has similarities to some experiences discussed in this research, where the participants enjoyed having sex, but had very limited or no communication during sexual activities. Research could investigate which BDSM communication strategies could be adapted to be effective AAC strategies in order to ensure safe, enjoyable and consensual sexual activities. This research has contributed knowledge which can advance evidence-based interventions and AAC technology. It has pointed out limitations which need to be addressed, and proposed that further research and development is necessary into AAC to support intimate conversations, especially in bed. It also proposed that personal care providers need to investigate the best practices for supporting their clients with sexual and intimate activities. Throughout the project, a sense of purpose and a pioneering spirit were noted in the responses of all the participants. Despite the relentless ableist attitudes they encountered, they generally did not focus on their disabilities as inhibitors, and their most influential facilitators were their resilience and determination. It has been a long process which started at Uni South Australia in 2013, and then transferred to Flinders University a year later. There have been many times when I have thought that the project had gone off the rails and, like many PhD candidates, have been tempted to give up. However, thanks to the tremendous support of my three supervisors, Pammy, Ruth and Paul, and the many robust discussions we have had along the way, they have guided me to produce a piece of academic research, of which I am proud. Also thank you to the Office of Graduate Research and the Disability Services of Flinders University for their ongoing support. A special thanks to my academic assistant, Mr. David Roberts. During my candidature, you have been with me through the ups and downs. You have seen me at my best and at my worst. Yet, you have stuck with me throughout. Thank you, David. To the 9 participants, I have been honored by the keenness the 9 participants showed by sharing their personal stories. To many of you here today, and present by the internet, who have assisted and supported me also in many ways on this journey, I say thank you. Everyone, thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Daryl. We've got, I know we started off with some technology issues, but you've got a few minutes, and Daryl's happy to take some questions from here or from those who have joined us over Zoom. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Kathleen?
Daryl, thank you
One
for,
second.
thank you for a very inspiring, and I think you mentioned limitations of your research, but a serious strength is that you were a member, if you like, of this community, and that would have encouraged people to share things with you that they may not have shared with other people. So I think that's something you should really highlight as a very positive part of your research. But my question is about the ableism, and did you strike issues with ableism, for instance, when you were proposing this research, and from an ethical point of view, and how did you address those things?
Simple answer is yes. In the ethics, he tried to give them everything they need and more. In the hope to get over the extra.
I do have that in
And he details that in the thesis.
Any other questions or comments?
Were those findings mainly from 4 participants, and then if so, what information did you get from the other 5 participants?
Do you have another day? It would be hard for Daryl to answer. You can't present the whole thesis in 40 minutes.
Were they involved? Sorry. Were they involved in sexual relationships or not?
You mean the other 5?
Yeah, the other 5. Yeah.
All of them.
Thanks, Daryl. That was a very interesting presentation. One of the things that I'm just interested in is whether any of the participants had good experiences in terms of agencies having policies and being supportive and facilitating an understanding, or was it a bit of a barren field of indifference, and you had to find willing workers who were prepared to go down that track? Not you, but the participants.
Out of the 9, there was 1, and there were 2 that actually talked about their support workers in detail. Sadly, he can't report that they were very good. They had to seek out people who were prepared to push the boundaries.
That is high enough
Hard enough when you can communicate. Well.
Thanks, Gerald. Tara's got a question for you here. She's saying about universal design. She's wondering, it's been rarely deployed for sexual communication. Are there benefits in returning to universal design from your research?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
He touches on it a bit in the thesis. There's a problem with designing for everyone and then designing for a specific population. You need to know more about the area, no?
I know that you know about that area, and
He knows that you know more about the area, and there's a need for more research. Maybe we can talk about it.
Any other questions or comments? Ellen?
Yeah, Darren, I just want to say congratulations, and I'm really excited to see what you do next with this research, and I know that you are definitely going to be an amazing researcher, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do. My question is around, were there any issues with ethics, because it is quite a sensitive topic, and what was your experience with getting through ethics?
Did you say ethics?
Yeah, what was your experience with getting through the ethics process?
As he said earlier, he gave them all the information he thought they'd need and then piled a bit more on. As you are researchers with disability, you have unique perspectives. And you're used to having to be always have to be ready.
And we have always living out
Looking for attitudes that will
looking out
looking out for attitudes that will prevent us from doing what we need to do. Just need to write all that in the ethics. We already do it. Do you know what he means?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think if you've been a researcher who's been in a disability, I don't think people would have felt very safe talking about their experiences, and that's definitely a major strength in you as a researcher that we all have to be very aware of as well. Definitely. Thank you.
We just found out that the people who were on Zoom, they didn't hear any of the presentations, and they only could see the slides, but they're really appreciative of that. So hopefully, we'll have to make sure we can make the recording available. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming and also for staying on for extra 10 minutes. Well done, Daryl.